We would like to begin. So if you could make yourselves as comfortable as you can be, then we would like to start. My name is Simon Rietbergen from the FAO, and I will open the event before handing the microphone to the presenters of the day. Dear Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, it is a great honor for me to address and moderate this official side event on the need for mapping and understanding mountains in the framework of climate change. FAO is proud to be one of the founding members of the Mountain Partnership, which is the group of organizations, both governmental and non-governmental, that organize this event. It's a voluntary alliance comprising over 286 members, 57 governments, 14 intergovernmental organizations, 210 major group organizations, including civil society and the private sector. And as FAO, we're also proud to host the Mountain Partnership Secretariat in the headquarters in Rome. The Mountain Partnership aims to bring attention to mountain peoples and mountain environments so as to improve their livelihoods and increase their resilience. We do this by advocating for global attention at all the levels, global, regional, and local, to promote joint projects, share knowledge, and develop capacity. Here at the Climate COP, we want to underline today how we all are dependent on mountains and how we're all connected with and affected by mountains in more ways than we can imagine. Mountains, as you may know, are the water towers of the world, and they provide between 60 and 80% of freshwater resources, essential for drinking, cooking, irrigation in many lowland agricultural regions, hydropower, and industry. For example, Africa's major water towers include the Middle Atlas Range here in Morocco, the Fouta Djallon Highlands of Guinea, the source of the Niger, Volta, Senegal, and Gambia rivers. Mr. Traoré will soon make a presentation on that. The Ethiopian highlands, Kenyan highlands. These mountains supply vital water resources to some of Africa's major cities, including Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Johannesburg, and Marrakesh. In addition, mountains provide essential products such as food, fuel, timber, medicinal plants, minerals, and host approximately 1/4 of global biodiversity. Yet, mountains and mountain peoples are extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change, which include extreme weather events, rockfalls and avalanches, and erratic water availability. Whereas food security has improved considerably worldwide over the past decades, it has actually decreased in mountain areas. The impacts of climate change on mountain environments affect all of us, whether we belong to mountain communities, as some of the people here do, or whether we live in the downstream lowlands where most of the world's cities are. The 2030 Agenda and the Paris Climate Agreement have provided a new impetus to the Sustainable Mountain Development Agenda. Thanks to the advocacy effort of many Mountain Partnership members, there are now 3 Sustainable Development Goal targets, 6, 15.1, and 15.4, in which mountains are mentioned. Furthermore, many mountainous countries have included mountains or mountain-related issues in their INDCs, around 48 countries at last count. Today, mountain environments are extremely heterogeneous, both in biophysical and socioeconomic terms. So we need disaggregated data to underpin the new policies and investments needed to implement the 2030 agendas. Today we have a distinguished panel of speakers who will illustrate ways of improving our evidence base for sustainable mountain development. Andrew Tabor, in his role as Mountain Partnership Chair, will talk about the work carried out by the Mountain Partnership Secretariat, which is hosted by FAO, to improve our knowledge on both the social and environmental conditions of mountain areas. We will also look at important examples of mountain communities' adaptation to climate change, such as the case of the vicuñas in the Andes, presented by Eric Chavez of the NGO OIKOS. And we will see how international cooperation can help, for example, through the UNDP GF Small Grants Program by Charles, and the adaptation and mitigation programs funded by the International Climate Initiative, which is funded by the German Environment Ministry, which will be presented by Tilman Herz. Building resilience of mountain peoples and mountain environments is key, but to achieve this, we need to include mountains in the climate change agenda. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Andrew Tabor for his presentation. Thank you, Andrew. It's yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Can you
I will put it on.
You'll put it on. Okay, well, I'm going to take you on a tour a little bit about some, and in particular, draw attention to some recent work of the Mountain Partnership. As our moderator mentioned, I'm the chair of the Mountain Partnership, which is an alliance of about 57 countries and 280 other sorts of organizations. So it's really the primary network of organizations and countries that work together to address mountain issues. But I'm also the executive director of the Mountain Institute. So firstly, and I shudder to think I may be sounding like a broken record here, but I want to underline some of the key issues and why we need to be concerned about mountains. Firstly, they cover nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface, and they're also home to over 900 million people, about 13% of the global population. They also shelter about a quarter of terrestrial biodiversity and almost a quarter of all the world's forests. They provide vital ecosystem services, including fresh water, but play a key role in disaster risk reduction. It's not without reason that mountains are called the world's water towers. They are the source of 60 to 80% of global fresh water. If you think about it, roughly half or more of the world, billions and billions of people, are deeply dependent on mountains, and the fact is most people don't know that. They're also economically quite important. 15 to 20% of global tourism, mining, agricultural products, and so on come from mountains. However, there's a whole set of specific challenges, and I'm going to take you on a tour of just one of those, which is frankly quite horrifying and really should be more highly featured at events like this one. Mountain dwellers face high risks of food insecurity. As Simon just mentioned, globally, the situation in terms of hunger has gotten dramatically better. There's about 160 million people less that suffer vulnerability to food insecurity than a decade ago. But in mountains, it's gotten 30% worse. So it's shifting. The lowland areas are getting better, but mountains are getting far, far, far worse. I personally find the number of food insecure people in mountains utterly unacceptable. If you consider just rural mountain areas in the developing countries, roughly half of the population are vulnerable to food insecurity. This is an issue that has not been sufficiently recognized, and this will have severe consequences both for people and the environment. Hungry people cannot steward mountain ecosystems in the way they need if those vital water resources, amongst other things, are going to be effectively conserved. Climate change is in many ways a vulnerability multiplier for food insecurity, but also a set of other issues: fresh water resources, biodiversity, land degradation. As I visit the number of projects that we're involved in around the world, what do I see in communities we visit? I see young women, I see children, I see old people, I see no young men. There's a broad pattern also of socioeconomic marginalization, and the list goes on with many and diverse challenges. In terms of addressing this, there's good news. You already heard that something like 48 of the NDCs have specifically mentioned mountains. And last year, 2 years in 2015, thanks in large measure to the work of the Mountain Partnership, the specific needs of mountains have been recognized in 3 targets and 2 of the SDGs. In particular, target 15.4 under the terrestrial ecosystem one focuses on by 2030 ensuring the conservation of mountain ecosystems, including biodiversity, to enhance their capacity to provide benefits essential for sustainable development. But I want to draw your attention to the many other SDGs for which mountains are highly relevant. At a meeting at the UN in New York about 3 or 4 months ago, one of the statements from very senior UN staff were that you guys need to look at how mountains fit in across the Sustainable Development Goals. And just one example, SDG 2 related to zero hunger makes no mention of mountains. There's no specific attention to mountains, yet that's where 40% of the people vulnerable to food insecurity live. That's a mistake in my view. Looking forward, how are we going to monitor this? How are we going to track this? Well, the Mountain Partnership, through its secretariat based at FAO, has been charged to particularly focus on target 15.4 and has developed what's known as the Mountain Green Cover Index to do that. And what this does is aims to measure changes in green vegetation cover, forests, shrubs, trees, croplands, pasture lands, to monitor trends regarding the mountain target. Our hope is that this will serve as a proxy for the status of mountain ecosystems and their capacity to fill these vital ecosystem roles, ensuring that the water towers of the world can continue to fulfill these functions upon which national economies and many people in lowlands and uplands depend. There's a whole range of data sets that have been deployed to build this index. They include the quite wonderful Collect Earth tool that the FAO Global Forest Survey Project is using in collaboration with many partners around the world. There's also been analysis of global assessments of trees, forests, and land use trends, global map of mountains, and a diversity of other sources to develop this index. And it's already provided a really interesting baseline looking across the kinds of land use cover types. So the colored areas on this map reflect areas which are mountains, and you can see that they're looking both at agricultural lands, grasslands, forests, shrublands, forests, etc. And so this is a snapshot of mountains today against which we can evaluate how successful we've been in terms of implementing the SDGs going forward. If we take it here to Morocco, this shows this is a snapshot of the situation in terms of land cover types in mountains in this country. And one thing I particularly wanted to draw your attention to are the brown pixels, which reflect bare areas, snow and ice, of which there are lots across this map. And those will be changed as precipitation patterns change, rainfall, snow cover patterns change, and so on, with consequences for water supplies for an extremely water-stressed country. So our hope is that this can be a valuable tool for the Moroccan government, Moroccan civil society, Moroccan people in managing and protecting these vital resources. So where does this take us? And I just wanted to underline a few very specific key points. In terms of recommendations. One, we need to specifically assess mountains across all key SDGs. And I think as we've seen, relying on mainstreaming, relying on mountains being picked up just through general initiatives has not proved adequate. Just look at the food security situation. We need to increase research, mapping, and monitoring to fill essential knowledge gaps. We need to integrate top science and traditional knowledge to generate solutions. We need to bolster capacity, both institutional and mountain community, and we need to increase investment in mountain livelihoods and environmental management, in which I particularly highlight the potential for ecosystem-based adaptation. In the end, I think it's my duty as chair of the Mountain Partnership to call for equity for mountain people and mountain environments across all the multilateral environmental agreements. We've got lots to do. There's been a lot of lip service. There's been a little bit of attention to mountains, but we're not nearly there yet. We need to look at what the small island developing states, the forest community, and so on have accomplished, and we need to find our way forward to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful in addressing a vital resource or in meeting the needs of mountain indigenous people. So with that, I'll pass the baton back to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for your impassioned plea on behalf of mountains. And I think after Mr. Tabor's presentation, we don't have to have any doubt about how important the mountains really are. We have a slight change in the order of our presentations. So I would now like to hand the floor to Tilman Herz from the German International Climate Initiative. I will put your presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Climate Initiative of the German Ministry of Environment. And I'm actually here today in order to talk a bit about OIKOS, International Climate Initiative. Work in mountain way, a certain type of way that we can do adaptation in mountains, notably ecosystem-based adaptation. And the way I would like to do that is that, first of all, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview about OIKOS funding volume or the portfolio. Secondly, I would like to just highlight actually why BMUB, the ministry, thinks that EBA is such an important approach, and also why it is important or the relevance of it to mountains. Third, I would just like to say a couple of things about the role of OIKOS in promoting ecosystem-based adaptation. And then finally, I would like to just go into two examples of projects that OIKOS funds in mountains. And then finally, I think I would like just to finish with some really important challenges that also we as a donor think are very important to address in the future. Okay, so since 2008, actually, OIKOS funds projects, bilateral, regional, and global projects in 4 areas. This is mitigation, adaptation to climate change in the area of REDD, and in the area of biodiversity. Since 2008, we have funded over 500 projects with a total volume of about 1.7 billion euros. Now, the violet part that you can see there, the 357 million euros, that refers to adaptation to climate change, and ecosystem-based adaptation to climate change is part of that. And here we have, since 2008, supported 30 projects with about approximately a volume of 100 million euros. We work in all kinds of ecosystems, addressing all kinds of impacts, and also across all regions of the world. But moving on now, why EBA? I mean, why is EBA important for BMUB, and also why is it important for mountains? Well, first of all, let me just remind you the definition of EBA. EBA refers to the use of ecosystems as part of an overall strategy to prepare people against the adverse effects of climate change. But the thing is, and I'm sure that everybody has heard it about 20 times now, that's not all of it. It does much worse, much more. It does adaptation to climate change. It does biodiversity conservation. It does carbon sequestration. It has important effects about. It helps disaster risk reduction. It works for livelihood sustenance. Especially, it helps diversifying alternative livelihoods. So all in all, sorry, I can't really see from here. We can say basically that. EBA measures deliver many results, and that irrespective of whether the anticipated climate impacts occur. In other words, it is a type of no-regret measure. Therefore, it is very relevant for the SDGs, and therefore also not only for the target 13, which is the climate target in the SDGs, but for many other targets, and also for targets which are particularly relevant for mountains, which are the targets that you mentioned beforehand, 6 and 15. And this is one of the reasons that BMUB really is convinced in this approach and has been supporting it since the very beginning, since 2008. Moving on, so what is actually, how does OIKOS do that? Well, first to set the scene, it was incredible, but last year in Paris, we actually did, well, it's actually not correct. A project that was supported by IKI did an analysis of the NDCs, and there we could see that over 20 countries actually refer explicitly to ecosystem-based adaptation in the NDCs. And more than 100 countries actually have ecosystem-based visions for adaptation. And so for us, it's a perfect entry point. So what we have been done in the past, we will continue to do that. In other words, we will continue generating systematic knowledge exchange. We will do that across regions and ecosystems, and we will continue addressing the many open questions, gaps that we have still about EBA. But at the same time, it is good to do that, but at the same time, we really have to start also to step our efforts up whenever we demonstrate solutions, and also, you know, this question is about upscaling. We really have to start implementation, and we have to move beyond the pure knowledge generation in EBA. Okay, now I will just go for a quick project example. It is actually a project that is supported by IKI, and it is done by IUCN. It works in several countries, as you can see, and it's called EPIC, which is a beautiful name, and that stands for Ecosystem Protection for Infrastructure and Communities. The idea is the rationale behind this project is that they want to promote ecosystem-based adaptation, or eco-DRR. I mean, and to show that it is an effective approach to adaptation, and at the same time also to disaster risk reduction. And the idea here is to move from anecdotal evidence to systematic ecosystem-specific results in about 6 different ecosystems and countries. And to ensure the sustainability of the approach, the idea is to establish durable, sustainable, multi-stakeholder platforms to anchor and support EBA in the partner countries. So I'm just going to go for 2 concrete examples there. Yeah. So this is Chile, what they do, what EPIC does in Chile, and I really like that picture because actually what they're doing here, they're building a hotel. And I mean, obviously, most of us were not professional, but maybe we can see that this is really an avalanche release area. So I mean, this really showcases how important it is to increase our knowledge about these kind of things. And here, EBA, ecosystem-based adaptation, can be a very powerful tool. What they did actually in that project was to do an analysis of forest and avalanche interaction in this area, because forests, they can stop erosion, they have the potential to stop avalanches or to mitigate the bad effect of avalanches. And what they found was that the forest presence and absence in this release area, as well as the forest density and the forest composition, are really key factors determining avalanche risk and intensity. So this was the first phase of the project. And in the second phase, they went on to use that knowledge. So what they did, they managed to promote and inform forest management in this area based on the data and knowledge that they have generated. And secondly, and which I think is really a great achievement, they have managed to discuss together with the local government to use those hazard maps, the hazard maps that showcase which areas are really the avalanche release areas, to use them for regional and local land use planning. So let's just use also another country, in Nepal. What they have tried to tackle there were landslides and erosion. And what they have done here is basically the role of vegetation to reduce erosion rate. And they have found, like what I personally think is an amazing figure, that the erosion rate in one site had been reduced by 95% in only 2 years after the implementation of the ecosystem-based adaptation measure. They did that alongside roads. And so they have made an assessment of the value of eco-safe road. In other words, roads where they have supplemented the road building with the EBA measure, and compared it with traditional infrastructural building. And they found that eco-safe roads become more cost-effective after 12 years, as repair costs are significantly lower than those incurred by traditional road building. So this was the evidence that they found. And what they did then in terms of implementation They have established 3 soil EBA measures pilots in collaboration with the local governments there. They have done a lot of training about how to do those eco-safe roads so that the knowledge stays where it should be applied. And then very importantly, they have managed to mainstream the concept of eco-safe roads in relevant national Nepalese policies, such as the Nature Conservation National Strategic Framework for Sustainable Development. Just to finish off, I would like to highlight some lessons learned and then also some challenges, which I would be very happy that my successors will address with the more technical knowledge that they have. But lessons learned, I think like it's amazing because until recently we really had very, very little knowledge on ecosystem-based adaptation. And I think that this has really improved considerably. And I think this is really a great achievement. And also a second lesson learned is that I think that since 2008, we can say that EBA measures work or can work very well. But still the problem is that they are not necessarily being prioritized by politicians. And this is partly because the knowledge that has been generated is very heterogeneous. In other words, there has been a variety of donors and institutions and organizations that have been doing EBA projects, but the way how they gathered the knowledge was very different. And when it comes to implementation, the problem is that I feel that very often, if you have the chance or the option to go either for a gray infrastructural measure or for an EBA measure, then if you do the gray infrastructural measure, you have standard or more like standardized methods of evaluation and planning. So it gives a kind of security whenever you do these actions. But in EBA, you don't have that. So as a decision maker, if you have uncertainty versus certainty or presumed certainty, then obviously you go for a certainty. But I'm really hoping that, you know, also with the Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, which is a network of institutions doing EBA, this will improve considerably, and this will also help EBA in mountainous areas. Okay, and then quickly some of the challenges. I think that one of our big problem is that EBA measures are still very site-specific, and that it is difficult without any further analysis to upscale them. So this is really a problem still. And then what I find is difficult is the monitoring part, because combining adaptation, ecosystem health, and actual results in a single monitoring framework is still very complicated. But this may be very useful for the Paris Agreement, Article 7, which is about enhancing adaptation action, but that we have to be able to measure. And finally, very often I feel, okay, this goes a bit beyond EBA, but I mean, very often present governance arrangements rarely match scale nor dimension of ecosystem, and very often we can have conflicts here. Okay, I'll leave it at that and look forward for the next discussions.
Thank you so much, Tilman. I think your presentation was another good illustration of the fact that often if we make these investments now in climate adapted infrastructure, ecosystem-based adaptation, it may be a little bit more costly now, but it certainly can save a lot of money in the future. I would now like to pass the floor to Mr. Traoré, who will do the presentation on Guinea. Would you like to? Yes, you can do.
Yeah. Before I start the presentation, I would like to make 2 remarks. This presentation is a part of the partnership on the mountains. He gave me the honor to present his paper because he believed that I could speak English, while I don't at all. So please don't don't really be shocked when I will say some of the terms that are not appropriate in English. So, but I will try my best. The theme is climate change in mountains. So this is a study case of Guinea. There is a mountain there called Gangang. Gangang is not a big one. It's a small mountain, but it is so well situated that Mr. Kwande did a study tour in that mountain, and patiently he managed to understand some of the things which we are going to talk about. So, my problem is I'm not seeing very well. Okay. So what is Guinea? Guinea, this is my country. It is situated in Western Africa along the Atlantic Ocean. It covers a superficie of 245,857 square kilometers, and the population is around 10 million to 600 people. And, no, it's not so,
Please come sit here.
I think this is easier here.
Sit here. You'll be able to see it better.
I can't
Please sit here, and you can see it right there on the screen.
Yeah, it's easier.
Okay,
It's a bit
that will be
awkward.
better. I'm too young, you know. Okay. So, Guinea is a very rich country. We proudly say it. It is potentially very rich because we have 1,127 rivers. These very many rivers are springing from just two range mountains, the Fouta Djallon Massif and the ridge of Guinea. The ridge of Guinea is in the southern part, while the Fouta Djallon is almost in the middle part. But when you look at the whole map of Guinea, only a part, because geographers divide Guinea into four parts. They say it Lower Guinea, that is along the coast, Middle Guinea, that is corresponding to the Fouta Djallon Massif, Upper Guinea, that is in the northeast part of the country, and that which is situated above just 500 meters above the sea level. Then you have a Forest Guinea in the southern part. This is Guinea, as I said. You can see the left side. This area is called Basse Guinea or Lower Guinea, Middle Guinea, Higher Guinea, Upper Guinea, and Forest Guinea. This is what I was saying. Here, you have what we call the Massif of the Fouta. Here, you have many mountains higher than 1,000 meters above the sea level. Here also, you have some. It is a range of mountains going from the source of a Niger River to the Nimba Mountains, that is the highest mountain of the country, 1,700, almost 752 meters. It is not going.
Maybe.
In Guinea, we have many mountains, although they are not as high as that, but you have here the list of 8 mountains. Going from Gangang, that is the mountains we'll be studying in detail, 1,117 meters, that it is situated at the Kindia. You have the Mount Lura in the Massif of the Fouta. You have the Tinka also in the Fouta area, the Mount Sincere between, which is at the end of the Futa Massif. Then you have Mount Nimba, that is the highest mountain in our country, 1,752 meters, situated at the border with the Cote d'Ivoire and the Liberia. Then you have some other mountains like the ridge of Ziama and the Mount of Gori. It is known, and it has been said by IPCC, how the climate change do impact on the life of people living in the mountainous areas. They say that the people living in these areas are the guardians of the ecosystems and services rendered by the mountains, but they are also benefiting for the ecosystem services that are produced there. So they are unfortunately very vulnerable. It is known that when you talk of a climate, of the climate cause, the climate change, causes of climate change, some of them that become interest mountains are deforestation, the use of fossil fuels for domestic and transportation and other things like that. Then the agricultural practices that are not adapted. Then you have the bad exploitation of mineral resources, if you have mineral resources in that. In our case, the highest mountain, that is the Nimba mountain, contains iron ore. So there is, it has always been like that, a kind of a discussion between UNESCO, big companies, the government of Guinea, etc. They're saying you do not have to exploit because we have something very precious on the top of the mountains. It is a kind of frog, but it's a frog that does not lay eggs, but it gives birth. It's a very special one, and they want to preserve it. But we are saying we need to develop. So that's the. Then you have. Okay, let's finish almost. When we're talking of Ganga, I said Ganga is situated almost at 130 kilometers from the capital city. There it rains more than 2,000 meters of rain per year. And the increase of temperature and the diminishing of rain amount that is falling have been noticed in that area during the last few decades. There, people are living mainly of agriculture. And these people practice agriculture, they do the farming, and when they're doing that, they do not do it carefully. Sometimes they destroy the ecosystems entirely. But as I said, given that they are living on agricultural activities, they are very much exposed to the bad consequences of climate change. Consequences of climate change in the mountains. So let's say erosion, for example, loss of vegetation, the loss of biodiversity, the appearance of a few new types of diseases, and the drying up of water sources, and the increase in food insecurity are some of the consequences which can be seen. When we look at that area, I told you, Mr. Konde did a study tour there. He noticed that 12 villages are living on that mountain, but look at the way the mountain has been degraded. And it has been now very much touched by some of the things. As I told you, 12 villages are living there. Yeah. You can see healthy people here. Many young children are being born because there's no cinema. There's no other things to do, so you understand. But they're living on agricultural activity. This is a plantation, a banana tree plantation. In some areas of the country, it is healthier than that. But you can see that it's not. Here, they've done some agricultural activities a year before. Unfortunately, the vegetation has not recovered. Unfortunately, they've started also cutting the trees. They want to sell it to the city. And they do not only cut trees to do agriculture, but they also use bushfires. Here you have a let's say a failed rice field. It has been grown rice here, but it has not succeeded. Then in the area, unfortunately, there's no facilities for them. No school, no medical center. Here you have a child sick. So they need to be assisted. So to permit them to adapt to climate change, they need to have an assistance. So let's say the authorities must strengthen the resilience of those communities. So they must be taught new cultivation techniques because they are farmers. Some eco-villages must be created and they must be helped in the certification of mountain products. Some roads need to be built to have access to that area. And they need to stop cutting wood for food cooking and other things like that. They need to introduce cooking stoves, improved cooking stoves. So it has been shown, we tried to show that people living in the mountains are not really in security with the climate change because they are mountaineers and they are poor. Above this casual poverty or the ordinary poverty, they are not suffering from climate change effect. As such, everybody, starting by the powers, the public authorities, must do the best to help them adapt to climate change. It is time for everybody, not only for the partnership members, it is time to put pressure on governments and other parties that are attending important meetings like COPs to look at the situation of mountaineers to help them ensure a sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very kind. I'm sorry. I'm not sure. You covered this is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Traoré. One of the amazing things when you think about the Fouta Djallon in Guinea is that the decisions that farmers and livestock raisers in those mountains that they take there have an impact all the way to Mali, to Niger, and to Nigeria, through the Niger River Valley, and also in Senegal and Gambia. So definitely, as we said in the beginning, we're all linked up. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Eric Chavez Betancourt to make the presentation about Peru. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everybody to be here. And I'm going to speak about vicuña lands. Vicuña lands, it's a very special animal. It's a symbol, it's a symbolic animal of our country. And in fact, it's a symbolic animal from the Andes. So we have been dealing with Peruvians, we have been dealing with vicuña since long ago, even in the Incas times, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, we were using these animals for the fiber. It's the most expensive fiber in the world, we would say, you know. So this is a project related to community-based wildlife management that basically is related to the conservation of wildlife habitats and the animals, and looking for the improvement of the welfare of the populations and the communities who live with. So we're going to start showing some fast facts. Okay, nice technology, nice. So if we go to pre-colonial times, there were like 2 million of animals in the Andes, no? Then the fiber, the commerce of the fiber was pretty open, and people start to hunt these animals to cut the fiber and sell it. And in 1960, there were only 10,000 animals. So the animals before, we say hundreds of years ago, belongs to the Incas, or ancient king. Later on, the government become owner of the animals. So the people in the communities, they say, these animals are living here in my territory, so we'll catch them, or we cut the fiber, and then we sell it. Later on, the government say, okay, this strategy is not going on. We'll change. Now we will give the property of these animals to the communities, and the communities will say, now it's more interesting. So I will stop killing the animals, and later the animals start to get increasing in number. And in 1987, with 60,000 of animals, the CITES, I don't know how familiar you are with that, changed the situation of to vulnerable, and then you can start selling some part of the fiber. So the communities start to find benefits from the animals. In 2012, the last census, it says that we have 200,000 of animals in Peru. As I said, the fiber of the vicuña is very fine. It's the most expensive one in the market, the international market, and 1 kg of fiber costs around $300. Around 4 animals make 1 kg every 2 years. So like this, you can see how it is. Where the vicuñas live, they live in very important ecosystems. I'm a veterinarian. I've been working with these animals since long ago, with llamas, alpacas, vicuña, and many times we were working with poverty alleviation, rural development. They say, yes, very nice, very nice, we love the animals, but we don't give the money to work with these poor people, no? But nowadays, with the climate change, we have another argument to work with these animals. So now we say, yes, the grasslands where these animals live, that are between 3,500 to 800 to 5,000 or 4,800, they are huge in Peru. So it's almost the 15% of the Peruvian territory. And recent studies, they say, so these animals, they live in an area where it's also give some ecosystem service, key ecosystem service, like water management, and also they fix carbon. So, and the situation starts to change, because now we have some data that related to net primary production is that say it's around 4.6 megagrams, in fact, is tons of carbon for hectare for year, and depends of the quality of the grasslands. So if the grasslands are in better condition, they will sink more carbon. If the grasslands are in bad condition, of course, they will sink less carbon. So these animals are very well adapted to these ecosystems because they evolved with this ecosystem. They don't eat the grass, they cut it in some very particular way. And the anatomical parts of the animal, when they walk, they don't produce erosion. So it's a strategy. Now working with these animals became a strategy facing climate change. I never imagined that, but it's happening now. I'm here. It's true. It's true. So this animal is a strategy, and we have lots of people, I will say now, who live and depend from these animals, not only vicuña, llama, alpaca, and other animals, contributing to the water regulation in my country and fixing carbon, sinking carbon for all over the world. These animals also live in wetlands because they have to drink water every day. They are some kind familiar with the camels here in Africa and Asia, but they have to drink water every day. So they live, the other important ecosystem are these wetlands that also they are important. Now, the recent findings compare these wetlands like the wetlands of the lowlands of the Amazon basin, no? So they are very deep, around 5 meters, and they are pretty young. Since they are pretty young, they have the capacity to keep sinking and fixing carbon. So that's also a very important argument for these animals. And around 4.2% of the Peruvian territory are these Andean wetlands, peatlands. If we see the distribution of the vicuña, these are recent data, we check that are around 7% of the country. But not, of course, there are not only vicuña, there are llamas and alpacas, mostly alpacas, and there are some cows. Not lots of cows, because the cows I guess, are very difficult to stay there, but some of them, they are 4,000 meters, you can find some. So they cover a very important surface of our country. We have made some initial research on this, and we find that you can see the map over there that these animals, they live in some areas. The yellow part are llamas, and the other part are just vicuñas. So in some areas you have just vicuñas, and where there are just vicuñas, because it's a good business, the people don't used to have cows or other animals, but they share their lands with alpacas in other parts. If we see other departments or the regions of Peru, maybe there will be more mixed. But this is an example of Pampa Galeras near it's in Ayacucho. But what I mean, this is the place where the vicuña starts to regrow the population. So what we do? How we get these animals without killing them? Of course, no. So we use the chacu. That is an ancient traditional practice that basically is to create some kind of trap. But you can imagine that the Puna ecosystem is very high, 4,000 meters, and you have to run behind the animals. So I invite you, everybody, tomorrow to come. Please, let's run behind 4,000 meters behind these animals. It's very complicated, but they have some kind of techniques, very interesting one. And you can see, they somehow run. They create some kind of core, and they put all together. Then they take the animals, they cut the fiber, and then finally you can see this animal alive without the fiber. So now we can see that the conservationists, we can see, yeah, we are taking care of the animal welfare and biodiversity and all of that. Of course, there are many studies that we can do. So, and where goes this fiber? If the price is 300, so one of you has a jacket of $20,000, but some people buy it. So there is a very small market. I imagine, I don't know anybody who has this kind of jackets, but exist. $20,000 jackets. On a scarf, maybe $3,000. However, bad, always there is the bad, but however, the communities are still poor. So this is a very good example about how complex are the relationship between markets, conservation, communities. It's not easy, no? If the situation will be easy, maybe we'll have no job also. No? So, but we have to think about this kind of things. So there is a big potential, but as I said, the communities are still are still very poor, and we have made some study and small study related to the people who lives at 3 kilometers from the Vicuña, and they are like 200,000 people living around the Vicuñas at 3 kilometers. If we go to 6 kilometers, we find 5,100. And if we go to 9 kilometers to the Vicuñas, we have 1 million. So 1 million of people is significant. It's significant people who are social and environmental vulnerable. So when we speak about Vicuñas, we don't speak just about conservation, just about ecosystem-based adaptation. Of course, we speak about poverty alleviation. We speak about 1 million of people who potentially has the opportunity to change their life with these animals. So this project, Vicuña Lands, is a project that we are dealing together with the Mountain Institute, with my colleague here, Andrew, Jorge Richard, who is not here, and my colleague Kike, and in Peru, and me, and other people, many other people, of course. So what do we want to do? No, what we need to do. So we need to start to create new mechanisms, new financial mechanisms, new conservation mechanisms. We have to cluster. We have to do new things. To have to think about how to improve the situation. We, as you can see, there is a big potential, but still there are many things to do. No, so in these areas, the people conserve the environment because they use ancient techniques, no, for water conservation, for pasture conservation, water infiltration, that we call we grow up the water. You know, people grow up the water, create some kind of artificial lakes and stuff like that. So we have to mix that. We don't need just high technology, Japanese high technology. We need also low technologies, affordable for the people and for these areas. And mixing them, we have an interesting potential, also more acceptation for the population, of course. No? Then we have to create new terms. No, so many people work in RED, no, RED plus, and everything. Now we have to create the RED. The RED is reduction emissions for avoided degradations. So tomorrow we have to think about RED. I say RED plus. Now you say have RED Puna. So we need this kind of things. You have to create this kind of number. You have to think about Vicuña credits. You have to think about to work with the industry and say, okay, I will take care of the lands. I will sink carbon, but you give me the opportunity to make a business. So we are not begging. We're not. Yeah, I think the time asking for money just for conservation is gone. No, now we can. With this, we can generate business and sustainable business. And that's the sustainability of this kind of things will be the future, actually. I agree when the people say that this COP is an adaptation COP. I like that. However, the adaptation, still we don't have enough information and enough tools to deal with. Ecosystem-based adaptation is a very good one, I would say. I think I like that. And I would say this is also a project related to ecosystem-based adaptation. So integrate this kind of economical and environmental drivers is important. Supporting the UN conventions is important. But here we work with 3. So this kind of presentation, I can do it in Biodiversity COP, the Certification COP, and Climate Change COP. So we were unifying the terms because at the same, finally we are dealing with the same problem. It's the environmental problem. No? If we go to the Sustainable Development Goals, I mentioned so many, and then you will realize that there are so many Sustainable Development Goals that we can use in this project. So we integrate these communities in the global market with the drivers, economic drivers that I've said, and we strengthen the identity of these communities. No, we say that what you are doing is very valuable, and the animals that you are taking care of are very important, not just for you, but for everybody. So I don't want to distract you anymore. My name is Eric Chavez. I thank you very much for your attention. And I presented this photo is from Nepal, it's not Peru, because I want to say that these kind of things we have to think about how to scale up, not only my country, we have to scale up to Chile, to Argentina, to Himalayas. We have to start to think these kind of places are have to be like laboratory of ideas. I think that's the success of this kind of meetings. And the last thing I want to promote one congress related to this International Congress of Environmental Socioecosystems, socioecosystems.
In the high Andes.
In high Andes. So you're very invited, and if someone of you wants to come and run behind the vicuñas, please let me know. Please prepare yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. I would like to issue a health warning, though, to the people. Eric has encouraged you 2,000 meters above sea level. I would just like to say, don't try this at home, because it might be quite dangerous. But on a more serious note, Eric, thank you so much. And I think one of the themes that Eric has touched is very important, is this notion that mountains and forests in general produce some very, very valuable products. But if you see what part of the value of the final product actually accrues to the local communities, often it is too little. I did the numbers quickly, Eric, that you gave. There is a potential production of $8.4 million a year from those 200,000 vicuñas up there. That is quite a bit of money. That could do quite a lot of good for the local communities. But the point is, of course, that most of that money gets made elsewhere. And thankfully now we have some tools that we've developed to try and improve these value chains and get more of the value added locally. So thank you so much. I would now like to look at the time. It's 20 minutes past 2. We have about 25 minutes for discussion. The floor. Oh, sorry.
One more.
Sorry, there's one more. So yeah, we ran a little bit over time. So Charles, please don't feel any pressure, but 10 minutes would be great.
I'll do it from here. So could I have that presentation there, please? I think the benefit of coming last in the presentation is that you benefit from the fact that certain parts of the presentation is already covered up. And so I will try. So what I wanted to discuss with you is the experiences of SGP, the Small Grants Programs, which is implemented by UNDP, a corporate program of the GEF. And we are in 125 countries, which includes about 37 seats. So the kind of information that I want to pass or discuss with you is related to a few of these countries and a few of the projects that we implement across the globe. Now, my first slide was about the threats and the issues surrounding the mountains. And I want to say that this is, eloquently covered up by a previous speaker, which is Traba, so I will not go into this a lot. But what I wanted to flag here is the fact that mountains are actually providing a different ecological ecosystems, So what you have at the tip and what you have at the bottom are not necessarily the same, but they're actually related. So what you do up there and what you do downstream or at the bottom tends to affect each other. So that important consideration needs to be thought through, because my presentation somehow is going to give that particular emphasis. So in terms of the facts or the threats about the mountain, that's fairly covered, so I don't want to talk about that. And you can see them there. But what I wanted also to focus on is that there is also attitudinal shifts in terms of the kind of crops, the kinds of plants, and the kind of diseases that are associated with those particular altitudinal ranges. But more importantly, is that this is part of the things that we need to address when we are talking about adaptation. And how do we overcome some of those changes that is taking place because of the impacts of climate change? In SGP, we have 2 key programs in which we have been discussing adaptation. One of those is a pilot program that was supported by the GEF, which we called a program on specific priorities on adaptation. This program was implemented in 10 countries across different geographical zones to represent and to test and validate evidences on how communities can actually adapt to climate change. And we've had fairly good success in terms of how these projects have been implemented. And here, in this particular case, I'm going to give a few examples from a few countries that have not been mentioned here. And if a country has already been mentioned here and an example has been given, I will try to avoid that and just keep that slide and just focus on those countries that we have not had an example from. And the other project that we're implementing is supported by the Australian government, and this one is focusing on the small island developing states. So I will also mention something from Jamaica to represent the small island developing states. So as I said, so the countries that I want to focus on are basically Bolivia, Guatemala, Jamaica, Kazakhstan, and Morocco. And also looking at issues related to the fact that even though some of these small island developing states do not necessarily have, big mountains, or the project that you are focusing on tended to focus on coastal zones, the impact and the activities that were happening up in the mountain zones actually dictated what happens at the coast. So even if you had design and adaptation, strategies, those strategies need to relate very well with activities that are happening on the mountain areas. And you will see a few examples of those. So the first example that I want to elaborate on is a Tanzanian example, which is coming from Kilimanjaro Mountain, and a project that was implemented by the small grants programs called Community Management of Protected Areas Conservation Program. This particular program is an initiative of the UNDP Small Grant Program, and the United Nations Foundation started sometimes in 2000 and is operational in 9 countries in Africa, Asia, Mesoamerica, and the Caribbean. And the important thing that the focus was on the community-based initiatives that can significantly increase the effectiveness of biodiversity conservation in globally significant protected areas while improving the livelihoods of the local people. This particular project had a specific approach, and the approach was a protected landscape approach in which there was need to integrate nature, culture, and local communities. It embraces the central role of communities as stewards of landscapes. And I think we have already heard this from the previous speakers. And more importantly is that the project itself emphasized on participatory approaches between local communities, park management, local authorities, and other stakeholders. It was also premised on the fact that if you have to do these conservations, that you need to involve people that are close to the resources themselves. And who are these people? This tends to be the communities themselves who are living and interacting with these resources from mountains. A second example is from Bolivia. And here we have been focusing on mountain zones of Bolivia's La Paz department in communities in Carabuco, who have actually implemented a project that recovered what was thought to be a disappearing, particularly important crop species, which is the tarwi or lupinus. Lupinus is a leguminous tree, which is actually used to help in, helping other crops by, shedding its leaves, and is also nitrogen fixing. And this particular crop was more or less disappearing from its natural range. So what we did, we asked the communities, we worked with them, and we helped them to be able to get this from the wildings and bring it back into a production system. And with that, we could see a number of results. Some of the results have indicated here. There were increased yields in crops that the communities were planting. These are potatoes, beans, and okra and barley. And most importantly, that best practices were now replicated in a number of community settings. Local adapted varieties of the particular species, which is the charwi, was now brought into a larger production system. So we can see an example of how communities themselves can identify what they consider to be very important in their production system, and if this is getting lost, that they can actually bring this into a production system. What I did not mention in the beginning is that all the projects that we are implementing in the small grants programs are actually community driven and designed and basically conceptualized within the communities themselves. So what we do, we help them shape them up into a normal projects that you can actually implement, monitor, and be able to evaluate results. So these are communities' ideas, these are communities' priorities, and they are related to community issues as they see climate change impacts their livelihood on a daily basis. Another example, which is example 3, is from Guatemala Mountains, in the area of San Marcos Department. And here you see communities getting engaged in agroforestry related activities. The adaptation that we help them undertake, or the adaptation measures, is the fact that they could actually have increased use of native species in the agroforestry systems that they were implementing. We also help them come up with management regimes that include irrigation systems, ditches, terracing, and also help them build nurseries that could provide the needed resources for stabilizations of the slopes. So here you see important results which are related to agricultural production getting increased. Water contamination problems were also handled and reduced. Food security and pollution associated with health risks were generally reduced in this particular community settings. And of course, we had increased knowledge exchange between communities themselves. And the relationship that I actually emphasized in the beginning between upstream and downstreams were further enhanced and discussed, and the communities could be able to speak to each other and see how the activities relate to the other communities' livelihoods. So we think that these are approaches that, if they are taken on board, that we could have a healthy adaptation processes that are actually not necessarily disadvantaging any other community groupings within the same landscape. And the fourth example is from Jamaica Mountains, which was focusing on Jamaica's Blue Mountains. The important thing about this particular mountain is that one part of the mountain is actually a protected area, while the lower slopes is an area which is key to the coffee growing area. The project supported the communities to combat landslide and soil erosion, and I think we've had other examples on this particular area. And the kind of adaptation measures that we supported the communities to do was to transform their hillsides into an organized, well-drained, contoured land and terraces, identifying and helping them to plant native species in buffer zone areas, while integrating better management practices to provide stability to those slopes. The other, what we can call a little bit alien to the community traditional way of doing things, is that we supported them come up with greenhouse farming techniques, for which I think they were able to go against the weather-related impacts in this particular area. So I lost it. Okay. And in Kazakhstan, we also get another example of the SGP support to the Tian Shan Mountains. Here, the important part of it was to see how communities could implement sustainable land management and water management activities, helping communities to adapt to winter temperature increases, wind-induced soil erosion, and increase some evapotranspiration. Now, what I found very particular with this particular project was the fact that, we were able to help communities to undertake certain simple water conservation measures using drip irrigation systems, to establish forest belts, which were actually useful for snow capture, a technique that I think is very easily adapted by communities, and to be able to increase water resources needed for community household as well as for planting crops. Now, further to that, it was possible from the forest belts that were planted to be able to, influence the microclimate around community dwellings and in the farmlands. Results particularly were quite impressive because we saw that the drip irrigation helped this community decrease water consumption by about 50 to 60%, increased savings of the communities by about 200% from water consumption costs, and that about 97% increase in seedling survival was now possible in the planted belts that were meant for, enhanced water capture from the snow during the winter time. And of course, at the end of the day, all this provided an increase in additional income for the communities. And we were able also to restore quite a sizable proportions of acreage of land from being degraded further due to overgrazing. One other project that I think somehow has been alluded to here is the UNDP implemented project, which was implemented in 3 countries, Uganda, Nepal, and Peru. And these particular projects help to reduce the vulnerability and enhance the resilience of select fragile mountain ecosystems and their local communities to climate change impacts by using sustainable management, conservation, and restoration of ecosystems as part of an overall adaptation strategy. And so to speak, I think I want to diversify that mountains are not necessarily only very important when you look at ecosystem-based adaptation, but we also need to look at adaptation that are people-centered, which is a community-based adaptation. And I think when you bring the two together, then you have a more or less a holistic approach in terms of helping mountain communities to better adapt and to better prepare against the risk associated with climate change. And so for this particular initiatives, I think we have mentioned it, and I'm going to give just an overall result that came out of this particular initiative. One is new and field-tested methodologies and decision-making tools for EBA, including vulnerability and impact assessments, were generated and have been shared very widely. Monitoring and evaluation centered on ecosystem resilience is being also tested and proven, and I think what is left is to see how this can be replicated and enhanced. Capacities and knowledge for stakeholders, both for early actions, no regret solutions, and longer term EBA measures have also been actually tested and proven and documented. So Nepal has been mentioned, so I would rather skip that particularly. Peru as well has also been mentioned, so there was another example that was given. But I want to focus on Uganda, which is the Mount Elgon region. Why is this more particularly important than because we just had recently, a couple of months ago, the World Mountain Forum in Uganda, and one of the areas that was visited was actually Mount Elgon, which is the 4th highest mountain in East Africa, and is a major catchment area that straddles the border between Kenya and Uganda. Communities in this particular area are heavily dependent on firewood for cooking and also for heating, and they cut trees and gather wood daily on a daily basis for their own household needs. Deforestation, therefore, is very rampant in this particular area, and of course, increased soil erosion on the hillsides, leading to very dangerously steep slopes, which is, of course, can be attributed to impacts of climate change. The constructions of and promotions of efficient wood fuel has been one of the major interventions that this particular project brought into the area. And I think a few evaluation of the impacts of this particular interventions has shown that you can actually significantly reduce the pressures on the mountains if you adopt a better energy cooking systems. I just wanted to conclude by saying one thing, that it is important to be able to invest in communities, to invest in community knowledge, and to also to be able to invest in cheap and simple technologies that can actually be quickly adopted for the sake of adaptation and for the maintenance and support of ecosystem services coming out of mountain zones. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Charles. Charles reminded us that mountain environments are heterogeneous and the communities too. And so if we do climate change adaptation intervention in mountains, it's very important that they are community-based and they bring in the aspirations and the technical knowledge of the communities. We have very little time for questions, but I would like to ask people for 3 short questions. So I'm going to take the first 3 that have a short question, and then I will allocate this to the panel unless you mention the name of the panel member. Who would like to start with a question? Paul Mafabi. Right.
Thank you very much, Simon. Mine is not a question, but just to...
If it's not a question, you have to be extra quick.
Yeah, putting all this together, we've just completed the World Mountain Forum in Mbale, Uganda. And the document that was adopted is called Mbale Call for Upscaling Action, Don't Leave Mountain People Behind. So we believe that this is an important document that will be available very soon for all of us to look at. But something else, that there were many important people in that forum, but there was a spiritual leader from the Himalayas called His Holiness. And actually what many people don't know, that after the event, he offered to bring 200 tourists to Uganda in 2 years' time. So that was an important benefit.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Charles. A question from the Minister of Guinea, Madame Kourouma Hadjas Christine Sagno.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Je n'ai pas une question, mais c'est un plaidoyer. Puisque vous avez vu dans la présentation de la Guinée, nous avons beaucoup de montagnes. Et nous avons une grande population qui vit autour de ces montagnes. Donc, je viens vers vous pour voir si vous pouvez nous appuyer avec des projets pour tenir compte vraiment de la population qui vit autour des montagnes. Avoir des mesures riveraines pour ces populations. Merci.
So thank you very much. Minister Kourouma from Guinea said, as we saw in the presentation, there are large mountain areas in Guinea, even if the mountains are not very high. There are many peoples living off these mountains and that having trouble with food security and with their livelihoods, and any support in terms of projects or other interventions would be very welcome. Thank you so much for that intervention. I have time for another question. Christina.
Thank you very much. Just a quick comment. It strikes me that the EBA community has made big strides in promoting the concept, but at the same time, I think in some cases, EBA initiatives have not really lived up to their aim of being the objective. That link with helping people to adapt to climate change has been a bit lost. So I really appreciate the indigenous community-based adaptation approach, which really centers on that, helping people to address their needs and building communities' adaptive capacity. And I wonder how we can kind of bring these two communities a bit closer together to learn from each other. And I think then we will get something very effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Who would like to comment on that? Tilman?
Yes, thank you for that comment. Just if I may, but to my understanding, I mean, we don't have to open this discussion right here, but just as a comment, I think to my understanding and the way how we understand ecosystem-based adaptation, it's not adaptation of ecosystems. but it's adaptation of ecosystem. It's adaptation of humans via ecosystems. So it's a totally human-centered focus, and it's basically you could do EBA within the framework of a community-based approach. But I mean, I would not necessarily restrict the concept only to community-based approaches. I mean, it could be, taken up or picked up by a variety of different levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the point being that ecosystem-based approach could be at many scales and at multiple scales at the same time. I do think that there is, for instance, under the CBD also the ecosystem approach, which puts people at the center of ecosystem management, but from the name, that is not immediately obvious, right? Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have another response about how to link people. No, I think the best way to link people is to promote their own activities, activities in this case, like traditional activities, and find the links that unify these people. No, in this case, as we have seen, this people running behind the vicuñas, but it's a party. No, it's a day where all the communities of the area, they come together, or maybe all the people from one community come together, and these kind of things reinforce the identity. And also many times they work in areas that they like or they love, or they are sacred areas for them. So this kind of bottom-up proposals are important coming from them.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Can I have something on that?
I have Charles has a comment on that question as well.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add the angle of communities, and because you've had varied experiences since 2008 working with communities-based adaptation. While we have been focusing with communities as the central rallying point, we have not necessarily left the ecosystem in which they rely on. So I think it's very difficult to make a clear distinction between communities when you're looking at community-level adaptation. Both are interrelated, and one needs to find a nexus between the two to be able to push in a much more, integrated approach, which I think is what we should be going for.
Thank you so much, Charles. That reminds me that, of course, for many mountain peoples, they don't have a word for environment that doesn't include them. Like many peoples all over the world, the idea of an environment without people is not part of their conceptual framework. With that, we're 1 minute over time. Thank you so much for coming and for staying and for all your interesting questions. And thank you. I would like a big hand for the presenters who gave all these interesting presentations. And I would like to tell you that there is another side event of the Mountain Partnership on the 14th, and it will be on the program, and we hope to see you there. Thank you. Andrew, you want to say when that is, or it's on the 14th, so it's next week. Thank you so much for your attention.
It's 1:15. The next Mountain Partnership one is at 1:15
Bearing room.
in the Bearing Room on Monday.
At 1:15 on Monday in the Bearing Room. Hope to see you there. Thank you so much. Good.